I'm Jeannie Walters, CEO of Experience Investigators. And happiness is being content with where you are when you're there.
Being content with where you are when you're there. That's beautiful. Would you say that you're happy then, Jeannie?
I think I'm a generally happy person. And right now, I am definitely happy, Phil.
Oh, that's awesome. So is that because the family, the job, and everything is going well, or why would you say that is? What's content right now?
I think, I'm a big believer that life is messy and hard no matter where you are, but we do have some control over what we do. And so, I invest in my contentment. I make sure we have family dinners and things like that because that's what makes me happy and that's what I know will contribute to the family as well. And work is work sometimes, but I love what I do in general and I love the people I work with and I love to talk to great people like you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I love talking to you too, my friend. So let's talk about experience, right? That experience then that the family gets, the experience that you have, certainly matters a bunch. So how do you successfully design that when you're as busy as you are?
Mhm.
What's the experience design there?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I'm a big believer in intentional success and what that looks like for me. And we do this with our clients too. But, you know, I think a lot of times it's easy to fall into the trap of just kind of going through the motions that you think you're supposed to be going through and then looking around and thinking, how did I get here? What does this mean? And intentionally knowing where you want to go and then kind of reverse engineering back. So I know that I want a strong family. I want strong communication. I want to be in touch with what my now almost adult children are doing. And I think a lot of that is being intentional about things like we have family dinner, we don't use our phones, we are talking to one another, and then that becomes the habit. And then the habit becomes the happiness, I think, too. And
Mm.
so, and I learned a lot during the shutdown, during the pandemic about what control I had over things and what I could do. And I mean, some of it is simple, some of it is, exercise is really important. Getting fresh air and sunshine in the morning is really important to me. So, playing with my dog intentionally, things like that.
Wow. Well, you said something there that I think is really interesting, and that is the habit becomes the happiness. The
Mhm.
habit becomes the happiness. So you're not happy because of random stuff. You're happy because you've got good habits that lead to that happiness. Did I
Yeah,
understand that right?
I think that is really accurate. Yeah, and what I notice about myself is when I get out of those habits, you start realizing like, oh, even though sometimes it's hard to drag yourself out of bed and work out in the morning. Sometimes you don't want to necessarily, you know, spend the time preparing dinner and cleaning up and all of those things. But when we don't take the time to do those things, when we don't really deliver on those habits for ourselves, that's when we start feeling down. That's when we start feeling like we're rudderless. That's when we start feeling like we get to the end of the day and we think, nothing really happened today, right? Like that's not a good feeling either. So I really have tried to just develop happier habits.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's great. I love that phrase. I'm going to write an article about that coming up pretty soon because I think the
Excellent.
habit becoming happiness is super. That's a super line. I'm stealing that one. So
Go for it.
I will. So with that, right? You do experience. You
Hmm.
do experience, whether it's customer experience or user experience or whatever that is. So explain to folks who aren't familiar with you what the heck experience kind of encompasses for the
Hmm.
work that you do at Experience Investigators.
Sure. Yeah. My focus for more than 20 years has been really customer experience as kind of the core. And one of the things that, if you kind of follow along with that topic, you cannot deliver a great customer experience without a great employee experience. So we do a lot of work around kind of connecting those dots as well. But really, when we talk about customer experience, people think that it can be kind of magic. Like they love to tell me either their worst customer service story ever Or they love to tell me like, "Oh, you should go to Disney World," or "Have you heard of Apple?" or, all the brands that we kind of know. But really, the brands that do this well do it very intentionally. They design very strategically a way to deliver the customer experience that they want for their customers. And that in turn delivers the results that they want as a business, because this all leads to higher revenue, lower expenses, more renewals, more referrals, more word of mouth, all of the things that we're kind of striving for. And customer service is often conflated with customer experience, but customer service is really what happens when things go wrong in the customer journey, and it's very reactive, right? Like, we're hearing from people who are saying, "I have a problem." What I want people to do is be proactive and intentional as leaders to define what that customer experience should be, and then reverse engineer it basically and say, what are the people, processes, technology, and tools that we need to deliver on this every step of the customer journey? So it's very strategic work, and it's also something that I think is overlooked as a way to succeed in business. We aren't taught to think this way. So that part of what we do is education and training and speaking and all that stuff, but we also work hand in hand with these leaders who want to do the right thing, but they haven't been taught where to start or how to deliver on it.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Yeah. I will tell you that as someone who used to be a leader in corporate America, that I never heard about,
Mhm.
intentional experiences. I mean,
Yeah.
we did a little bit on the website, but that was about it. That was the
Yeah.
only place that we would ever talk about that. But if we think about that, every department that delivers service,
Hmm.
which is every single department in an
Exactly.
organization, has to think about the level of service they need to deliver, right? Their service
Hmm.
level agreement, if you will.
Well, and we call it, we start with something called a customer experience mission statement. Like, what is it that you really, who can you be for your customers no matter what? And what are what are we really trying to do for them, right? Like, we're not trying to sell a product. They're trying to solve a problem. They're trying to feel a certain way. Sometimes I say you can have a customer experience going to a Taylor Swift concert or paying a parking ticket. Both of those things happen. And your customers are having an experience whether you talk about it or not. So, if you want any sort of proactive intention around it, you have to take a step back, and just like any other part of business, I mean, Phil, you're so great in sales, right? So what if you don't have any goals in sales and they say just go sell stuff? Just go sell stuff, right? Like, that would never
Yikes.
happen, right? But
Mm-mm.
it happens all the time in customer experience, and then they look around and think, well, I don't really. We spend a lot of effort, a lot of time on getting data from customers. We all, as customers, have too many surveys sent to us. We don't feel heard. And that's because that's where the investment goes, as if that's going to solve things. But that's just measurement. So we have to figure out, what are we trying to find out? What are we trying to deliver? Where is the gap? And how do we make sure that we consistently work on innovation and evolution to meet that gap between what are customers wanting from us and what are we actually delivering?
Okay, so let's talk about that, because I think that's really big, right? What do customers want, and what are we actually delivering?
Mhm.
And in between there, we do a lot of surveys. So okay, are surveys bad? Are
No.
surveys good? What are we doing here?
Yeah, so our approach to customer experience strategy, we talk about it as a mindset, a strategy, and a discipline. And inside the organization, you need to have that mindset, which is where that mission comes in. You need to define your strategy, and then you need the discipline of constantly checking in. We call it customer collaboration, and you're constantly checking in with customers. But the trick is you have to actually make sure that they feel heard and seen and recognized. When they give us their feedback, we need to acknowledge that. And often we're not doing the basics around that. And then the other part of that is information and data that we need to turn into insights that drive action. So we spend a lot of time surveying customers, and we spend a lot of time talking about it amongst ourselves and saying, wow, our customer satisfaction rate is going down. Well, that's a shame. We should work on that. We should send another survey. And what we need to do is look at what are they actually telling us? And it's not just what they tell us, but how they behave. because humans, we're notoriously irrational. We make no sense. We are driven by emotion and then actually rationalize our decisions after that. And so we say one thing and we behave differently. So we might say to a software provider, we want all the bells and whistles, right? Like, please give us all the bells and whistles. And then we end up using one. And that's the one that everybody wants. And it's because, yeah, it sounds good, but we're not in reality when we're responding like that. So we have to, as experienced leaders, we need to look at what are customers telling us, how are they behaving, and what is the operational data telling us? If people are not renewing, if they are not referring, if they are asking questions at a certain part of the journey, or they are calling into your support center, those are all signals that we need to incorporate into insight that then we turn into action and priorities. And we say, okay, we said, we promised this. We know this is the gap. Our customers are telling us this is a priority. That's where we need to invest our efforts.
Okay. So can you give us an example of an organization, maybe without naming them, right? That is actually doing this. Like,
Mhm.
how does that break down? Give me an
Mhm.
example.
Yeah, well, ideally, you have somebody who is focused on this. Most organizations don't. And they say things like, well, customer experience is everybody's job, and they expect that to work. But that's just words. How, you and I could define experience very differently. I might think it's really important to get back to somebody very quickly. You might think, I'm going to get the right information. I'm going to be as accurate as I can be. That's going to take me a little longer, but that's the right thing to do. Now, neither one of those things is wrong, but we have to organizationally define that. So, in an ideal world, you have a customer experience mission statement that is universally understood and internalized. It's a tool, it's not a poster on the wall. It's something that you say, okay, when you hire people, when you onboard people, when you are training, when you are evaluating, every single person in the organization knows what that is. Then you have a strategy with goals. So you say, well, our organizational goals are, I always use this because every single organization in the world wants to increase revenue and decrease expenses, right?
Sure.
So people are like, but I'm a nonprofit. Yep, they still want that too.
Right.
So, whatever your big organizational goals are, you want to start there and think about what are the efforts in customer experience that we can really deliver on this. So, for example, we have clients, many in B2B, and there was an example in the during the pandemic when things were kind of shutting down. They realized that they had big manufacturing situations, and they used to invite their clients in and really show them when things were starting on the assembly line and all of that. And that was a big part of the experience. And what they realized was they shut all that down, and they realized that part of their promise to customers is being transparent and allowing that visibility. And that was part of their mission. And so they had to realize, how can we actually do this differently, and what do our clients really want to know? So they created feedback surveys very specifically designed to get information about, okay, we know this is off the table. What do you want to see? What can we do for you? And then they were able to turn that into personalized video walkthroughs. And what happened was clients liked it even better, right? Because they didn't have to travel. They didn't have to commit a whole team going somewhere. So it became something that helped them innovate and stay ahead of their competitors even after the shutdown, because they were listening and marrying that to, this is who we are. These are the promises we made. We need to make sure that we continue to do that no matter what. So that's one example. And then there are a couple brands who do this really well. I bring up IKEA sometimes because they're very transparent about the fact that they are recommitting to sustainability in a bigger way. And what they did was think through the customer journey and think, well, we've all put together IKEA furniture. Have you tried to take it apart? It is a nightmare. You can't. And so what they realized was that was not contributing to their sustainability goals. And that's what their promise was. So they have been remanufacturing how they make these things so that they can be part of the circular economy. They can be easier to be taken apart, given away, sold, all those things. So, this is so much bigger than customer service or customer feedback. When you're doing this well, it's incorporated into who you are and how you are actually delivering on your business.
Wow. Wow. So Do they ever focus on this internally, Jeannie? Do they ever say, you know what, our accounting team needs to do a better job of that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think, the patterns that I see are, somebody comes to us and they say, "Well, we wanna be customer centric, so we're gonna be customer centric." But you know what the problem is? The problem is those sales guys, or the problem is the people in the field or the customer support, and they want us to just focus on that one group who is customer facing. But to your point, Phil, you brought this up early, like, every single person in the organization delivers on the customer experience, even when you're internal, right? Accounting is a great example. I have I mean, I can count on multiple fingers how many times this has happened to me where I've delivered a keynote, or sometimes we do corporate workshops, things like that, and accounting walks in like, "Oh, this doesn't apply to us. Why are we here?" And then they come up to me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea that, we are actually interfacing with the customer." Sometimes the most regular touch point we have is invoicing, right?
Yeah. With accounts payable or accounts receivable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people don't think about it as customer facing or part of the customer experience. That is absolutely part of the customer experience. So that's the type of, like, thinking we need to do. We need to open our minds to that, because otherwise they do focus internally, but sometimes it's with the wrong laser focus that doesn't
Mm,
really, make a difference. So, yeah, there are so many ways to approach it, and I think it has to be proactive. It has to be about, this is who we are, this is what we're trying to do, and this is how we're going to get there, instead of just reacting and pointing the finger to one another, which often happens, right? So,
yeah.
yeah, and that's one of the things that I feel like when I walk into a workshop, I always tell the folks that we're working with, I'm like, "I don't know politics. I don't care politics. We are all here for the customer." And as long as you can get people to see that, then it becomes collaborative instead of that friction.
Yeah. So what about HR, Jeannie? HR is an interesting touch, right? So
Yeah.
talk to me about how HR contributes to the overall customer experience.
HR is huge, huge, because we're talking about the folks who, are reaching out and recruiting and hiring, and the candidate experience and all of that. That has to be focused on who you are as an organization for your customer experience. You'll attract different people, all sorts of things. Onboarding, training, learning and development, all of that has to be part of this. And if there is misalignment between what we're talking about for customers, what we're promising, and how we're behaving inside our organization, people feel that, and they feel like it's disingenuous, because they're saying, "Well, you tell our customers that we're this great transparent company, but I can't get access to what I need to do my job better, or I'm not trusted to have the visibility in certain cases." So when that happens, that erodes the trust between employees and the organization, and then that shows up in the customer experience. And we've all had that happen, where you've been somewhere and they say, "Oh, sorry, my manager's the worst, and we're so short-staffed," and whatever. And they're literally saying this to customers because they can't help it. They're feeling it so much. So we love working hand in hand with HR. And sometimes, actually, what I'm noticing lately is that HR leaders are the ones who are, sounding the alarm on the employee experience and saying, "We need help." And so a lot of the best practices and tools that we do in customer experience, you can move right over and use it in employee experience. Customer journey mapping, employee journey mapping. Employee NPS is a big thing now, right? So we're checking in, getting that feedback. But if we're only doing that once a year and they're not feeling heard, the same rules apply. We need to turn that into action and progress. So yeah, we love HR.
Wow. Well, let's talk about employee NPS. I don't
Mhm.
know that everybody even knows what those initials mean. So
Sure.
let's talk about that. What is employee NPS and
Mhm.
why is it so important, Jeannie?
Well, one thing I'll say first is there is no magic metric. There's no one metric that will tell you everything. But in the last decade plus, NPS, which is Net Promoter Score, is has been kind of used in many ways as kind of that blunt object of as long as we track NPS, we're good. And now it's called eNPS on the employee side, and they're doing that as well. And essentially, that's the question created by Fred Reichheld, who it's the question we've all seen. Would you refer this product, service, place to work to your family or friends or colleagues? When you answer that, a lot of times it's a rating of 1 to 9, usually, or 10. And then there could be a follow-up. There should be a follow-up, but often there's not, where it says why or why not. So you start, ranking how you're doing based on how many people are responding with that 9 to 10 or 6 to 8 or below that. And the people below that are basically called detractors. These are the people who really are unhappy because they're not willing to refer. The people who or recommend, I should say. And then the high level people, the 9s and 10s, those are called your promoters because they're most likely saying that actively and without being asked about the great experience. So that question was originated because it's a great way to kind of gauge how people are feeling in action, not just, oh yeah, I'm happy today. It's about a behavior. And so that can be a really helpful tool. But again, it's part of a bigger process here. We cannot rely on one metric. And too many organizations actually gamified this and made it a blunt object. And that's why now sometimes if this happened at a car dealership, I went in and they said, if you're not going to give us a 10, you need to tell us why before I give you this postcard to fill out. And that's because inside the organization, they're using it as a punishment. They're not using it as learning or coaching or we're all in this together. When that happens, things get really off. So you have to be careful of that too. Same thing can happen on the employee side where we have those big annual surveys, annual employee engagement surveys. And if it's only done once a year, and again, they're kind of punished sometimes for sharing feedback about managers and things like that, then the next time they're just going to play the game. And so you're not going to get accurate information.
Or they're not going to fill it out at all.
Yep, that too.
Right. So you're going to
Exactly.
see. So one of the metrics that I've seen in organizations is that it'll just have less participation.
That's right. That's a great point, Phil. Yeah. And right now, we are seeing survey responses in general, the response rates are lowering all the time. And that's because we've all been, it's survey fatigue. We get so much and you don't feel like it's doing anything as a customer or employee. If you don't feel heard and recognized and they don't come back to you and say, this is what we heard, then it just feels like you're yelling into a void. And so who's going to do that?
Right. Yeah. Well, if you don't do anything, I think that's the key with surveys. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us. If you're going to ask the question, then do something with the answer.
Yes. And even further than that, Phil, I would say if you don't know what you could do with the answer, don't ask the question. So, for instance, people will design surveys out of curiosity. They'll be like, I wonder what somebody thinks of this and this. And suddenly it's 50 questions long and it's got all this stuff, but you have no plan of action with what to do anyway. If you know that your website, the back end can't change, right? You're locked in a contract or you just know that's not part of the planning. Don't ask your customers what they think until you're ready, because then they're going to tell you and feel like, well, it's going nowhere. And so I have seen so many meetings where sometimes we do one of two things. We report all the numbers and everybody goes, wow, that's a lot. Oh my gosh, we should do this and this and this. And they don't know when to prioritize or how to take that next step. So it's, analysis paralysis where nothing happens. Or we have a situation that we know is bad for the customers. And somebody will say, we should send out surveys.
Oof.
Why? Right? But we do it all the time in business, all the time. So I disagree sometimes with my data counterparts because data is incredibly important and you need smart data scientists and analysts and all of that. But sometimes the data is the data. And if we all agree that, wow, our customers really want us to open on Sundays and we're not on Sundays, but they really, really want it, Are we going to do that? You might not. You might say, nope, we're not going to do that. But you don't need to send out surveys if everybody at the table understands that that's not great for your customers.
Yeah, you don't need to poke the bear. Ask
Yeah.
the questions that you're going to do something about instead of just the ones that you think you're curious about
Yep.
or to see.
Exactly.
Yeah. So with that, Jeannie, how do we get started being better about experience though? If we're thinking
Mhm.
about, okay, I want to be better. I want to get started on this experience journey. What do I do, Jeannie? What are the
Mhm.
first steps or couple steps?
The first couple steps I would recommend is number one, the fact that you're thinking about it is great because most organizations, and if you look at how we're trained as business people, we're trained to think in departments, in steps on the inside of the organization. A very powerful exercise is flipping that script with customer journey mapping, just figuring out what's the actual journey your customers are experiencing. And we have lots of tools on our website, and I have a couple LinkedIn learning courses out there on this too. But essentially, what you can do is instead of thinking, okay, marketing does this, sales does this is what happens, you literally flip the script and think about, I'm the customer, and you use I statements. And you, instead of saying marketing sends this thing, I say, I receive this email. Am I? And then think about their real lives because we tend to think about the sales funnel and these nice linear journeys, but we're all just trying to live our lives. So think about them in their lives and what are they doing aside from this? It's not just your product. It's not just your brand. And really walk through that process and you will see gaps immediately. You will see places where you say, "Whoa, this is not what we thought was happening at all. We thought this was being taken care of." And then you want to take that one step further and think about what else do you need to know to make your experience better. And that's where you get into feedback and operational metrics and kind of that's why I call my company Experience Investigators because it really is the thrill of investigating. It's figuring out what do we need to know, how are we going to find out, and how will that drive action? And then think about your goals with customer experience. If you don't really have agreement, and if people are saying things like, we're going to deliver the best customer experience to every customer every time, that is meaningless. You're not going to be able to do it. It's not realistic. And what does the best mean? So figure out what does that mean for you? And then just keep going through those steps to improve and to bridge the gaps and to keep listening to your customers.
Wow. Those are some great steps, Jeannie, that it sounds like organizations can do, but it's going to take some work. And you said you've got some resources for folks. What's your website for those that need to hear it?
Sure, it's experienceinvestigators.com.
That's
Easy
easy.
peasy.
Experienceinvestigators.com.
Mhm.
Great stuff as always. So this has been Jeannie Walters with Experience Investigators, reminding us the habit becomes the happiness inside, outside, and all around our organization. But we have to define what that actually means first so that we can be intentional about it. Thank you, Jeannie.